Joining us now on the Newsmaker Hotline is KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst, host of FoxNews.com's DEFCON 3 show, which you can watch at 2 p.m. on Wednesdays on live.foxnews.com. And I've been reading, KT, that you have a bee in your bonnet. If you wore a bonnet, you would have a bee in it. You're not happy. You're boiling mad. You're upset about what Hamid Karzai did when our Secretary of Defense showed up over there the other day.
Hey, look, we've always known he's corrupt, right? We know that he and his cronies and his relatives have probably skimmed billions off the top of what's gone into Afghanistan. We've always known that he's incompetent. I mean, for 10 years, thousands of American casualties later, tragically 2,000 lives later, and hundreds of billions of dollars later in what we've tried to do to train their people, he still doesn't have a country that's unified behind him. He still doesn't have an army or a police force that can stand up and fight on their own. But now, what do we think? Now we think he's crazy. Well, I don't think so. I think this guy is not crazy. I think he's absolutely, in the time-honored Afghan tradition, he's switching sides. He's decided that the Americans are leaving, the Taliban are coming in. He just wants to make sure that he looks like the most anti-American person in the country. Why? Because he does not want to end up like his predecessor, mutilated and swinging from a lamppost.
Well, and you can hardly blame him. I mean, isn't this a result of us telling the entire world and telling everybody that we're out of here? What else is he going to do?
Look, what he should have done, well, what we should have done and he should have done, what we should have done is gotten out in December of 2001, followed the Taliban, the leftover 100 of them, of al-Qaeda, not Taliban, 100 al-Qaeda over the Tora Bora Mountains and killed them in Pakistan. But instead we stuck around in Afghanistan to try to engage in nation building. And then on top of it we tried to do a surge. So both presidents were mistaken. And what Karzai should have done is gotten down on his hands and knees and thanked Allah that he had been given the opportunity to lead his country. And he should have done it instead of trying to suck everything out of the United States and his country. I mean, I met with an Afghanistan leader, one of Karzai's deputies, and he said to me at the time, "Don't blame my people. We're going to get as much out of you as we can."
Wow.
Because we know you're leaving, and we also know that when you're leaving, we'll all be slaughtered. I don't see how any of that calculation has changed. That guy, by the way, has gotten out of Afghanistan.
Just another side note, while Hagel was over there, not particularly an impressive performance. I mean, we all hoped that he would not be...
Boy, you are being so generous.
Well,
not exactly.
We had all hoped that he would be better in real life than he was in his confirmation hearings.
Yeah.
We were reminded he's just not very good.
We were reminded that the preview actually was the movie.
Right. Yeah, KT, who knew that he really stepped up his game for the confirmation hearings? He was at his best.
Well, look, if you're a conservative Republican and you don't like the president's policies, I suppose, in a way, this is great because you've got probably what will be an ineffective Secretary of Defense. I think for the country, though, it's pretty tragic because that's got to be Obama's most important cabinet position. He's got to figure out how to cut the defense budget. Obama will probably want to cut it pretty drastically and still manage to protect the country. He's got to be the guy who figures out how to deal with the cyber threat, which in its own way could be as devastating as nuclear weapons were.
Well, and speaking of nuclear weapons, let's pivot a little northeast from Afghanistan and talk about North Korea. Should we be concerned about everything that's going on there? Is this saber rattling, or is there really a threat here? They're basically saying the armistice with South Korea is over. The tanks could roll any minute.
Yeah, they've said that before. I'm not as concerned with. I'm concerned with a couple of things with North Korea. One, the Chinese, and this is really their problem, and now it may have gotten too big to be their problem. They've been content to have that be a low boil for a long time because it kept the South Koreans off balance, it kept the Japanese kept us off balance. Now it's threatening to boil over, and I'm not sure the Chinese at this point can do much of anything other than the collapse of North Korea, which means refugees, which means instability, which means crisis. I'm concerned that what will happen is that South Korea and Japan will decide they're not sure about the United States. Maybe they need to, in the case of Japan, remilitarize, but maybe in the case of both of them, nuclearize as their guarantee that the North Koreans don't invade. I think the other thing I worry about with North Korea, I don't worry that they're going to wake up and nuke San Francisco, but I do think that an accident could happen. And we're right in the middle of that. We've got 30,000 troops as a tripwire.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I worry about is that North Korea sells its nukes and its missiles to Iran, if they haven't already, and then you see a nuclear arms race there.
But it's going to be better because, we've got Dennis Rodman on the job.
Hey, look, I've got to tell you, I don't know if you've seen it, it's circulating around the Internet. I got a cartoon this morning. It's 3 pictures. One, it's Kim Jong-un with a shocked look on his face talking to a general, and he said, "Oops, you mean that wasn't President Obama?"
Oh.
And then it shifts to, Dennis Rodman and Kim Jong-un courtside.
Oh my, that's actually pretty funny, but also kind of sad.
They're kind of tragic.
Hey, KT, can I ask you this? We just had a report on Ed Morsi is in Vatican City. They're waiting for the next pope there, the papal conclave. Beyond being a religious leader, John Paul II obviously was an enormous figure on the world stage,
sure.
and even his predecessor, our last Pope, Benedict XVI, he actually had some very strong words about radical Islam and actually made some political moves. Where does the next Pope factor in terms of the international political scene?
It could be huge. Just look at 2 popes who made a difference. The Pope who was the Pope during Nazism in World War II, he failed to step up and stand up to Nazism and Hitler. Then John Paul, who did stand up to communism and did help topple the evil empire, the collapse of the communist empire. And now it'll be the turn of this Pope, especially if he has a long tenure. He will be the Pope that has to stand up and deal with radical Islam. So it could be huge, because we would not have won the Cold War if it hadn't been for, obviously, President Reagan, but the Pope and Margaret Thatcher.
To follow up on that, because John Paul II came from Poland, which was a Soviet bloc nation, that gave him extra gravitas to really handle it. Could that mean an African Pope, perhaps, might have a better way to deal with the Islamic issue?
Yes, except that it will depend on the personality of the Pope, I think, even more than the geography.
Sure, yeah. All right, KT, that's great. I mean, I love how we can look at all of these huge stories and see how it all wraps up into your worldview, because you're our favorite guest.
That's right.
And we say that, and we do say that to everyone.
Yeah, you do this to us.
But we mean it when we talk about you. KT McFarland.
Don't discriminate.
KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst and host of FoxNews.com's DEFCON 3 show, which you can see at 2 p.m. at live.foxnews.com. KT, thank you very much.